Hi, everyone. Our next session today is Running Better Projects with Tools Beyond the Field of Project Management, presented by Inez Halaska. Inez has 2 decades of project management experience across a broad range of project types, including construction, IT implementations, business reorganizations, and event planning. Take it away, Inez.
Thank you very much, Alana. Welcome, everyone, and happy International Project Management Day. I always love these days. It's fun to hear from colleagues across the industry and get together and talk about things. What I'm going to be talking about today is just my personal journey in managing projects and how I actually started looking outside the field of project management to help me run better projects. Just by a show of hands, how many of you, if you could indicate by raising your hand or a reaction, how many of you, when you run your projects, you play multiple roles on the project? You might be a business analyst. Yes, a lot of us do that. Yeah. Does anyone else? How about change management specialists or facilitator? Okay, so a few of us. Okay, so I see that. So I've often worked for smaller agencies, so to speak. The biggest projects that I run are around $2 million. Maximum. And what I've noticed is, so way back when, this is what happens. We plan something, and then that's the way it goes. And so when I was starting my career, when I was about 22, 25, I found that there had to be a better way. I didn't even know about project management. I just knew, I have some sort of end result and I have to get it done. And there's often clients involved or sponsors involved. And so we hope to have this happen, is a big cheering, group, team, those kinds of things. So when I was in my 20s, I worked for the Calgary Science Center. Now they're called the TELUS Science Center. And I worked for the old building. We called it the old building. There was probably about a staff of about 100 people. And we were about to design a new science center that was going to be at least $20 million. It was going to be a new facility in a hub next to our zoo. And so a lot of the managers at the time received project management training. I don't know how many of you have heard of Dr. Francis Hartman. He was a fellow at the University of Calgary here, and he ran projects. Yeah, great, Chris. He ran projects, construction projects, and he also taught at the University of Calgary. And he was my first prof and my first introduction into the world of formal project management. Oh, yes, I have that book too. I remember I had to memorize chapter 13 and they were hazing me. For those of you who have not read the book, chapter 13, fortunately, is just a short paragraph, but it was a big joke to get the young person. Chris, have you had formal training by Dr. Hartman?
Yes, I had the opportunity to be formally trained by him back in the early 2000s when he had actually a relationship with KPMG at the time. And I got trained in how to do smart project management, and it's I have yet to find anything that comes close to the sort of the practical basis on which he created this.
So I think I was very lucky, actually, Chris. Yeah, that was my first introduction into formal project management. And the way Dr. Hartman did it was, as Chris mentioned, it's very practical, and it's from the point of view of the stakeholder. And so all of us might be familiar with the work breakdown structure, but he had what is called the stakeholder breakdown structure. And his key idea that really stuck with me throughout the years and through the city of Calgary, where he was really well known and his methodology was used, was what are the key performance indicators of the stakeholder? What do they care about? Why? And I believe, Chris, please correct me if I'm wrong here. He always thought of it first as who, one, and done. So how do you define one? How do you define done? And then who gets invited to the party at the end of one and done? And who gets to speak. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Chris.
No, that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah.
The other thing that I took away and continue to try to use is the idea of a cumulative achievement chart, and showing project management on a different XY axis than you ever see. And I still don't see anybody else using it. So it's nice to find somebody else who's the same way.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And I think, and I'm very grateful that he was my first professor, because he was more about the people and then the processes. Not saying project managers are not, but I think for a new project manager, oftentimes we get focused on the process instead of understanding the value and the people portion of it. So that was my first introduction to project management frameworks. And that began a journey of, wow, this is amazing. So then, yeah, I looked into PMI. I took PMI training and University of Mount Royal training through the project management body of knowledge. And as you can see, this is the typical traditional predictive approach of being on time, within scope, within budget. So when I took Dr. Hartman's methodology and I combined it with PMI, I got the best of both worlds, because Dr. Hartman was, yes, all about the stakeholders. What are the cumulative progressive values and which deliverables are tied to which stakeholders? So therefore, you know which ones you got to negotiate on, which ones you got to report on to that particular stakeholder. But then the PMI more detailed tools and techniques took me further into like, how do you do this? What are some best tips of how do you do this? So at this point in my career, it was, okay, I know a little bit about frameworks that give me stakeholders management, as well as what is those processes and techniques. And then I found out about Agile. And Agile was a whole new world. And I see, Chris, thank you, you're smiling. How many of you have worked with Agile? Show of hands. It's the latest and greatest, isn't it? And I recently found out, as many of you who might be experts know, Agile is about 100 years old, at least. And I was speaking with some people in construction and talking about how they can incorporate Agile into their day-to-day work. And they found it amazing, lean. So this Agile allowed me to take these long predictive projects, which had a lot of structure. And yeah, I based them on what the stakeholder needs were, and that doesn't capture everything in the project. But then Agile gave me the tools to, okay, break it up into phases and be more resilient with change. But depending on which organization I was with or which project I was working on, this wasn't a hard and fast rule. These are just tips to move in to adapt my project framework. And what I really found helpful were the idea around sprints and Scrum. So even if I'm not using an Agile formal framework for the whole project, I do use Scrum, especially in today's environment, to gather my team daily for a quick meeting. And I find that that has really helped with team building in terms of, we start collaborating on working together to solve problems. We work on what's going on today, and it helps identify risks, especially around Dr. Hartman. One of the first things he told me was, how are you going to find out in your project plan what you don't know? So we can plan for everything, we can talk to everybody, but often there's something out there that we don't know, especially if it's a new topic that we haven't really explored. And we think, oh, we're going to get industry standards in there. We're going to talk to subject matter experts. But for those organizations that don't have the resources to go out and get that information, how do you figure out what you don't know? And Agile and Scrum, the Scrum element of Agile, has really helped with that, because things come up in a day-to-day basis that you might not think of when you're doing overall planning. So then I was thinking, projects are about people. I don't know about you, but anytime I teach a class on project management, the one thing that common across industries, common across all walks of life, people want to know, project managers want to know, how do I work with people? And often I find that in the projects that I've been aware of or I've done or I've coached in the past, just because you build something doesn't mean it's going to get used, especially if you do not transition fully to the new state and you do not take away the old way of working. So then I dived into change management. And this is about helping people to adopt change. It's not about change control. And so I've become familiar with a couple of methodologies, and then overall, the Association of Change Management Professionals. I was actually, around when in change management when they were first forming, I think back around 2010, 2011. But I am ProSci certified. And of course, how many of you are ProSci certified? Anyone? Okay, well, ProSci is a very unique way of looking at change because, well, not unique, but they have a very specific methodology themselves. And the idea behind it is that organizations cannot change unless individuals change. So how do you take an individual through the current state transition and get to the future state in the most effective way possible? And so I have taken some items from their website. This is publicly available information, but basically it's ADKAR. And I find that even people who aren't formally trained in change management, when you present this model to them, even in a personal manner, they'll think about what is the thought process that I can put into my projects or the steps to help people manage change. So one, awareness for the need of change. Do they want to change? Are they going to participate and support it? Do they know how? And here I'd like to add on, this is, with the ability. So not only do people know how, but do they have the tools and the capacity to do it? I'm sure we've all heard of change saturation, especially in today's world. And you might have to consider that as part of your project. But there's also, if you're just one piece in a larger organization, depending what other projects are going on in the world, in your organization, you might need to leverage with each other. Because if you're a change project and there's 10 other change projects going on, you certainly don't want to have, and you have the one end user, you certainly don't want to bombard them with all these different kinds of changes. And then of course, reinforcement. And that's often where people or organizations fail at change. An example would be, so often, when I first started with the organization I'm working with right now, they were implementing a new file sharing system. We'll call it SharePoint for now. That's a lot of people are familiar with SharePoint. So they had a lot of people who had been working there 15, 20 years, working with the old system. But everyone was supposed to use this new system. So as a new person, they trained me on this system and that's all I knew. So that's where I kept all my files. But all the senior staff stored their files in another file system. And part of the problem there was they never took away the old file system. So they implemented a new system. They had a transition period, and then they just said from here on out, from this point forward, the entire organization is supposed to use the new file system. So anyone who's new will be trained on the new file system. People are expected to transfer their files from the old system to the new system, but they never took away the old system. And they never took away access to it either. So even today, 12 years later, there's files all over the place. There's a lot of people are using the new file system because we've had a lot of new people and that's what they know. But that old file system is still being used. And from what I understand, there's an additional file system about to be built and implemented. So it'll be interesting to see what lessons learned that they've gotten from change management. So that was one methodology. There's also APMG that I'm certified through, but this item right here, this book right here, this is the Effective Change Manager's Handbook. So this book is an amazing resource of everything change management. And there's also the Association of Change Management Professionals. And what I find interesting, being a member of PMI, is that a lot of new professional organizations are seeming to base their body of knowledge formats on how PMI did theirs, used to do theirs. So if you remember the old PMBOK, how there'd be tools, techniques, and processes, and if you look at the Association of Change Management Professionals, they do have a standard on their website, and it's free. You could just pull it up and read it. And they're at the first phases of their additions, and it's laid out not exactly like PMI, but you can see that that's where they're going with their format. So it's very interesting, and it's free, as I said. And then there's also these people here. These are just some of the leaders. So I've been reading a few of these over time. Peter Gallagher is one of the most well-known people in the change management field. And of course, everyone knows John Cotter. He's got the 8-step process, and William Bridges. So what I find when I've taken change management reference material and I've read it, or I've taken classes, sometimes it lives in the realm of theory. And unless you are a process person, like a lot of project managers are, you might not know how to apply that theory. And what I find with ProSize method, it is a very detailed, here's project A, here's and the change management effort, and then you combine them. So I like to take bits and pieces from all these theories and elements and combine them and make something unique. So what I have found, so far I have frameworks. I understand project management frameworks, processes, and tools. I've leveraged, people change management. So yeah, so what I found in my journey was I thought I had it down pat at this point. I have to say my ego was probably quite big, because I thought, oh, I know change management, I know project management. And then what I found, again, with a smaller organization, that upfront piece for projects was not completed, at least not complete, not done comprehensively. And when I say upfront, before you've signed a charter and before you've even said there is a project, the business case element, what problem are we trying to solve, had not been fully explored. How many of you, I don't know, just show of hands, how many of you have been in that scenario where you've been given a project and you're trying to look for documents or information and you just can't find it anywhere? Does anyone have anything in the chat? Yeah, Chris? Yeah, so you're expected to deliver something, and then you move along and you go along the way and you find out that actually what people were asking for is not what they needed or what they explained. So what that led me to, I thought there has to be a better way. We need to understand what problem are we solving, what opportunity are we trying to do. Now, the PM framework, that I was familiar with, you have a charter. It's been signed off. This is what the project is doing, and then you move forward. And yeah, there was nothing beforehand. There were some discussions, and the charter was being used as the high-level business case. So what I decided to dive into then was requirements. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. So, we get a charter and we say, this is how the customer explained it. This is what we understood. And then we build it. And then this is really what they needed. So I decided to go and learn more about business analysis. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have probably worked with business analysts, and there's a nuance and a fine line between what the PM does and what the business analyst does. However, that was where I was working. I did both. So basically, it was, what is it that we're trying to solve? So I went through and I took training through the International Institute of Business Analysis. And that was really interesting too, because they were first starting out. And so their body of knowledge, their version 3, is actually almost based on the same format as PMI was before PMBOK 7. it is a book of, here are the knowledge areas, here's the framework, here's the tools, techniques, inputs, outputs, those kinds of things. So it was a format I was very familiar with, and I appreciated it. And I got more information on how to plan, find out that problem, find out that opportunity, what are the requirements. Now imagine this kind of thinking and combining it with, you know, the stakeholder breakdown structure, you know, from Francis Hartman, you know, from the point of view of stakeholders, you build your work breakdown structure. Often I call it, and another version you can call it, is a product breakdown structure. So often when I coach other project managers where I work, and they're not sure where to start and they've never done it before, I tell them, okay, start with the people and start with the product and start with why. You know, go talk to them, find out what they're expecting and why are you doing this? What is the problem? So, and then of course, what you have to do with business analysis is you got to manage all these requirements, you know. So I found it, Chris, question for you. I found BA work, that piece around requirements, actually very similar to what Dr. Hartman was putting forward, just different language. I don't know if you would agree.
Now you're stretching my memory. So, but I would say yes, it's aligned, absolutely.
Yeah. So that idea of you have someone, a stakeholder, they want something. And of course, when you manage it throughout the project, you want to update that stakeholder. And if you think about change management, you know, one of the things they talk about when you're selling change is what's in it for them, the with them. Really define the with them. Well, if you're understanding what a person's or a stakeholder group's requirements are, that's what the with them is, you know, and there might be a few other things around the benefits. So this is all coming together. So then I started supplementing with other fields. So I'm very familiar. I've done strategic business planning. You know, what does the portfolio look? What's that bigger scenario? Because duplication of efforts, if you're doing a project and someone else is doing a project and there's change saturation in a community or with a stakeholder group, maybe you do something together, right? Risks are huge right now, especially in our uncertain environments. You know, predictive project management is, you know, for a low risk, low straightforward project, yeah, you might want to do it. But in today's world, I work for government. It's constantly changing. And then I've also started exploring transformation management, you know, those whole organizational, we're going to change fundamentally how we work. What does this look like? Multiple groups are involved. And of course, through BA work, through business analysis, change, and project management work, I started taking formal facilitation training. So I have a few certifications there, and not only within facilitation and communication, there's neuro-linguistic programming. So that type of training and that discussion helped me figure out, okay, so when I'm sure you've all heard of that phrase, the gut, what, so what, now what? So our brains actually go through, you see something, and this can happen very quickly. You observe something, you have a gut reaction. We're not talking, it doesn't need to be overly emotional or anything, but some sort of gut reaction happens. Your brain is processing what is in front of me. And it's also interpreting, why does this matter? And then, of course, then you figure out, why does this matter? And then now what is the action? So your brain is constantly going through that cycle. And the facilitation with neuro-linguistic programming, it's about slowing that down with your stakeholders to have that that conversation. What does that mean? Chris, just because you're on camera, and I really do appreciate it, it can be difficult to talk to a line of none. What types of projects do you do, Chris?
Well, you named it around transformation. For much of my time at KPMG and other larger firms in the public sector, so I have a great affinity for what you're talking about. Generally, it's about transformation that is IT enabled. So
Okay.
some form of generally business transformation and business-led transformation, but it has a significant IT or set of IT components to enable the new ways of working. And
so out of every
transformation.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you. So what tools do you use in your transformation that maybe I haven't talked about here?
No, you've named them. The one in the previous presentation by Andrew Schuster, he mentioned managing successful programs, which comes out of the AGILE group now out of the UK, and it's one of the few sort of methods, hesitant to call it a method, but I'll call it a method or approach that actually is more attuned to transformation. Because it takes into account the fact that it's about business outcomes. You know, it's not about just jamming some technology in. It's about, okay, so there's a so what question out of that. So that I wish I'd known about MSP earlier in my career, and because I think it's got the right level of focus within a program. I mean, there's lots of initiatives or component parts that you might call a project, but whatever you call them, those need to be managed, using good old fashioned project management.
Yeah,
those are like table stakes.
Yes.
But they're only going to get you so far. What I've been spending more time in recently, since my divorce from a retirement from KPMG and the larger firms as an independent over the last couple of years, I've spent more time in strategic planning or planning for transformation or setting up the conditions for success around transformation. And in that, during COVID, one's had to use a lot of electronic tools to help facilitate conversations that we used to be able to get into a room and put up the Post-it notes. You can't do that now. And I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to, at least not for some period of time. And so how do you build consensus towards, first opening up and get enough voices in the room, however you define it, and then come to a set of conclusions about where are we going, how are we going to get there.
Yeah. Thank you. That's very helpful. And I was just on the PMI website today, and they have a micro certificate on transformation now. So you can actually take these classes, and that seems to be the way the field is going, and along with Agile, right? It's about transformation, these big, large scale efforts. And I think definitely, so I've been doing this for over 20 years. And, at the beginning, it was just get it done. Now it's like, what value, which is good. It should have always been about value. And Dr. Hartman, that's what he stressed, right? But what value are we bringing? People, and projects are people. Even if you do an IT project, there's still people involved, and people are, they can be an unknown. And of course, research has shown about 80% of problems on projects can usually be traced back to root cause of communication. So these are the other skills that we need to build on and never stop. I know for a while there, I took a pause and I was learning more technical stuff. And then I noticed it's not that I stopped paying attention to it, but I took it for granted that I knew how to communicate. And I noticed there was even just change management, that awareness, sometimes you're focusing on one element and you've taken it for granted. Yes, you know how to do something, but we can't let that ball drop. And that leads to resiliency, right? How do we manage our own resilience so that we can help others do that as well? So what I've done, what I'm getting into lately is human-centered systems thinking. So there is an organization called IDEO, IDEO, and they're a virtual trainer, and they have web podcasts, and they have webcasts and articles. It's about how do you frame a system and design. So design is all about the user experience and designing a system and putting parameters around it so you can model the system. And what does it mean to experience the system. So an example would be, recently I taught a class around business analysis, and there's a gentleman there who is running a project, and his users were all the students in the university. So that was 35,000 people, all different ages, different stages of life. But not only that, oftentimes there'd be a new influx of 35,000 people. So they're there for a short period of time. So he was trying to figure out how to get an understanding of the user experience in an effective way that by the time they rolled out their project to production, it would still be relevant. Now, 4 years doesn't seem like a lot, but in today's world, especially with cybersecurity, things are changing on a dime. So how do we be more resilient? How do we deliver better outcomes? And how do we hear people and listen to them? So one step is to understand, how do you identify the current system and how do you build systems? So that transformation piece is all integrated. So often the way I think of something is I notice a gap. There might be lessons learned on a project, and it's, why did that happen? And then it's, we either had a skill gap or a communication gap, or is this a new field of knowledge? And then I go out and, there's tons of material on the internet. You could go, or you can take private training like ProCept, or you could go through one of the professional organizations. But you can bet that there's people already talking about this out there. And then there's also massive online open courseware, there's streaming, you can go on YouTube and even Google what it's about. And that'll give you an idea. Now, the good thing is that this is a life learning effort. So this is all about curiosity. You could, I think most project managers today are about lifelong learning and about talking to each other. That's what I love about PM days and the communities, the Project Management Association of Canada. You can always talk to someone else and learn from them, and as well share information and ideas. I know that when I start talking about project management, my husband actually says, he looks at me, he says, "Inez, I don't care, go talk to one of your friends." And then I do talk to one of them, and they love talking about this stuff. So, but the other good thing is we work in project teams. And so we're not alone. It's not that you have to do this by yourself. It's always good to have this knowledge. Like Chris was doing, he's doing transformations now, and what leads to better outcomes for people, but leverage the people on your team. Sometimes, especially in a virtual world, our team might be, across the country, and what we took for granted in person. So we have to make what we did in person, such as those coffee conversations, water cooler talk, the implicit information in communication, you have to make it complicit when you're virtual. So you have to make that much more time, that much more effort to do a formal coffee chat, because you're just not going to pass someone in the hallway. And we have to make more of an effort to put ourselves out there. Now, so we do have 10 minutes, and I was hoping to do this more of a coffee chat. So I'm going to just call on people to put in the chat, what tools do you use outside the project management field to run better projects yourself? Romas, are you there? Am I saying your name right? Is that? If anyone could put some tools in the chat box, what do you use to help run your projects? Or is there anyone who has stood out in your career that gave you an aha moment? Alana, you run a lot of projects. Are you there?
Okay. Yeah, I'm here.
What tools have you used to help run better your projects?
I mean, we occasionally use Microsoft Project to help us run our
Right.
projects. Meetings help us run our projects.
Great. And I see, thank you. And Philip, anything that you do?
Yeah, I've used Microsoft Project as well. I find it very versatile, and it integrates with a lot of the efforts that we make. However, depending on the size of the project, in Abu Dhabi, I ran I led the Ferrari World, small super regional mall development, a total of about 6 million square feet. And in that example,
Oh, you're frozen, Philip. Are you there? Hello? Hello? Well, while we're waiting for Philip, I see that, is it Yuhi? You like the daily check-in meetings and coffee chats to help with project management. Definitely, right? That's where it's the informal conversations that help us today, day to day. Philip, are you back? Oh, you're on mute, Philip.
I see. Thank you. So basically, by using the more powerful system in special ways, it produced a much more acceptable result. As an example, we had the horsepower built into our organization so that every night at midnight, all the commodities placed, all the hours worked the previous day were recorded within the system. So at 8 a.m., I showed up and looked at my dashboard. I had 4 senior project managers reporting to me. All of us had the same information. It mapped out our S-curve, showing us, how we looked from schedule and budget, and we popped up hotspots. So we went to see those hotspots that morning after this meeting, and we would decide what we're going to do about them. Next day, repeat. So the consequence was we built this, the 2.5 million square foot element in 700 days.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. And all just from that horsepower. I've actually been looking into data too. So in Tableau, just building a simple dashboard for my own project. But of course, this is extra time, right? And Chris says, here's a poll for the group, everyone. Put it in the chat, Do any of you have a PM tool for Gantt charts? Yeah, MS Project can be a beast for sure. I know that someone I know it wasn't for Gantt, but it started out with the work breakdown structure, Chris. It was called Draw.io. I'll just put it in the, and so what they did was they manipulated it to for a work breakdown structure, and then I think they were able to manipulate it into a Gantt. So there's an option. How about anyone else using something great for Gantt charts for Chris to look into? How about you, Philip? So you guys have a dashboard.
Yeah, well, the dashboard emerged from our Primavera P6.
Oh, Primavera.
And so functionally it was integrated, and so we kept a very steady pulse on the matter. And the further thing I should add is it really prevented having big claims. We actually saved $180 million in claims out of a $2.5 billion project. So not chump change. And that arose out of being, on it. We had a team of QSs working with us, and whose job it is to, firstly, suss out what the current going rate is for whatever commodity or service we're seeking, and
go ahead.
Complete the negotiation. So, we had a very, very detailed record of our to resist any additional claims that might have been made, which some were, as you know.
So a question for you, Philip. So when you guys were setting that up, was it, did you have someone with a specific set of data skills? Because I know I've been looking into data, how to visualize data and how to present data and using dashboards. But interpreting data and having the right data is that's a skill set on its own.
Well, firstly, one of the senior project managers who I hired, an American actually from LA, was very conversant with BIM and also dashboard creation. So, he rode herd on the creation of it. However, when you get a project of that magnitude, sky's the limit in terms of, the budget that you have. So we hired the best to help us in all respects. And just to punctuate that, just a guy from North Bay, all of a sudden I'm in charge of a $12 billion project, and my learning curve went like straight up from day one. And so anyway, it was all good.
That really speaks to, you don't have to be the expert per se, but hire the people around you and make sure they're experts. And what I love, I did put up a quote by Lee Iacocca. It's, you're in charge of a multi-million-dollar project. You can't schedule 2 weeks for yourself for fun. So keep in mind, we have to take care of ourselves and our people, and it's all about outcomes. And Chris is saying he's looked at a huge number of cloud-based tools, and oh wow, you helped Metrolinx implement Oracle for PM. That'd be interesting. Wow, that's nice. Yeah, we have our own we call them data and information management. We have our own design unit, but now that people are on board with data and visualization, those people, their time is, you have to basically go through a process and how do you get them to help build you something that you could take over. But yeah, so I know that with this session, we talked more about, what were the Power BI, definitely. Yeah, and that's a skill set too. We talked more about those high level, what is the knowledge fields and the tools. So the idea is just, when I look at my projects and projects overall, because I am responsible for coaching other project managers in the organization and the overall project framework, I see the trends. Like Philip said, you look for the hotspots and where is there that gap and where can I find that knowledge? And even if it's new and trendy, so to speak, you can bet someone out there is already talking about it, already doing something, and you can certainly explore. And the good news is that we do have a virtual environment in the internet generally. So you could just even Google, you start searching on Google, you'll be amazed at what you find. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I had one thing. One of the things that I learned when I went to Abu Dhabi was because the Brits had quite an influential stake in the region and had a long history there. So, we were using Emmerich, standards and so on. And one of the aspects of British construction culture is unique to them, but it's proliferating. We haven't seen much of it in North America, although they're present more and more. But what it is, it's an ancient term called clerk of the works. And who that individual is, or individuals, depending on the size of the project, is they're absolutely pledged to loyalty to the owner. So they're not beholden to any of the service providers. Their job is to do a variety of things, but one of them is to manage by walking about. So in other words, they're all journeymen, in construction. So they literally assist people to improve their processes at the coalface. Wow. But backing up a step, you can kind of get where this is going in terms of quality delivery. Backing up a step, they're very, very vigilant for any fudging. And so the result is that you've got watchers on the site who are beholden to you, the owner, and you get this very, very fine control over the process and the quality of the process. It's not just quantitative, it's qualitative. Wow. And so having that position in your toolkit is a big deal. And I learned it, and I've used it in India and in China subsequently. So, it works. Clerk of the works. And so just a side note. So we, the people like that exist in North America, but there isn't sort of a formalization of it,
That's really interesting. I bet. So you ran a project and there was one of these people there and they were hired by the owner, or were they actually hired by you?
I was the owner's representative. I was the developer, and so within the organization, so I led the development. And therefore I hired these people on behalf of the owner, and they reported to me, and so I got to know day to day what was going right, what was going wrong, what needed improvement. So the result was that it accelerated our construction, but it lent more quality to it as well, to the delivery process.
Wow, I wish we had longer now, Philip. I have so many questions, but it is 2:45, so I don't want to keep you. But
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've talked too long. But
no,
look
I
at
love it. I would be interested to know how that relationship was set up and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, maybe I'll reach out to Kevin and
Yeah,
see.
no, reach out to me. I
Yeah,
have my own
okay.
company.
Okay, great.
My website is blackopalpa.com.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure.
Thank you everyone for attending. I hope you got some information out of it. And if not, I hope it sparked something for you to consider, or even looking back on your own past of what tools you have that, you may not have realized that were not part of formally project management. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.